Hiya! Thank you for joining me for this video. I wanted to talk about something a little bit different today, which is the subject of partners and friends and basically how you deal with keeping, let's say, two different sides of your life separate. I guess the easiest thing to do is to start with a bit of background about myself. So I've been dressing for many years now, probably well over 20 years. But I've only really been sort of dressing seriously for the last 3 years or so. Since I've taken real sort of interest in makeup and clothing and going out and socialising and meeting up with people, etc. Before that kind of change in my life, most of what I did was limited to a few bits and pieces here and there. Something like popping on a pair of shoes in the evening, doing a little bit of makeup here and there, but nothing sort of full on. And I've kind of graduated from a situation where I would do a bit of something whenever I could, and it was kind of all very much under the radar, to a situation now where I only dress if I can dress entirely. I don't wear bits of women's attire, and I don't do bits of makeup. I either dress fully as Juliette or I don't. So it's very much a dichotomy for me these days. It's everything or nothing. And when I'm being Juliette, I'm entirely Juliette, and when I'm not being Juliette, then I'm entirely not Juliette. So that side of me is very much different to the side that I present on here, for example. So I might be surprised if you could recognise me if you saw me. I mean, I'm sure if you were looking for me, you'd probably be able to recognise me when I'm not wearing makeup. But if I walk past you on the street, I'm fairly sure you wouldn't be able to recognise me. You wouldn't see me and go, oh, that's Juliette. I think it would be that case. Now, to cover my sort of background, I was spending a little bit of time dressing, like I said, maybe on the weekends, in the evenings, doing a few bits and pieces here and there. If I was able to work from home, I would do some dressing whenever I had an opportunity, but it was never enough because I couldn't do this. So if I wasn't doing this, it wasn't enough. And now that I do this, I don't feel the need to do this every day. It's not something I feel I have to do, but it's certainly something that I couldn't get away to this level without at least some people in my close family and environment knowing about it and being able to see it, because it's part of me, and there are certainly things that manifest themselves. There are times when my nails look quite, well looked after. There are times when my eyebrows certainly look very well looked after. And I think these days there's much more acceptance of male grooming, to the point where it's not so noticeable, but there's only one reason why you may have chosen to do something like pluck your eyebrows or get them threaded or whatever it is you've done. And I think that's a really great thing for people these days. There's certainly far more excuses. One of the things that's a lot harder to justify is why your arms are completely hairless, or your legs as well. Mine are all scratched up at the moment from gardening, but whatever. You've got to live with these things. I've got to do my stuff, I've got gardening to do. So I have obvious parts about me that scream that I do things a bit differently. Legs always shaven, arms always shaven. So I'm basically entirely hairless. So that's something that is very hard to keep hidden, hard to keep under wraps. And you have to be able to sort of brazen these things out a little bit. But it's certainly a lot easier for people these days. So I wanted to do a quick video today to talk about some of the issues around communicating, being trans, to other people. Now, the first thing for me to make clear is that anything I talk about is going to be exclusively from my perspective. I've talked to many other people who have, they have their views on subjects. A lot of people are quite strident. I find particularly that people who have, let's say, already had bad experiences with their family, or who have been disowned, or they have, they've lost relationships. I find a lot of people like that have quite negative attitudes to being able to keep relationships working, probably because they've been burnt. And I find that people who have been burnt in the past, they certainly have a kind of it's their loss, not your loss type attitude. And I know that doesn't work for people. I don't really believe that if you have a good relationship with someone in your life, be it a spouse, father, mother, daughter, sister, brother, son, whoever it is, friend, whatever, if you have a good relationship in your life and you lose that relationship because of something relating to this community, something related to your trans activity, as much as you might, after the fact, you might tough it out, act like it doesn't matter, you don't care, not a big deal for you, at the time it's got to be pretty devastating. And I think most people would prefer to avoid that, which is why a lot of us keep this very much under wraps. So my situation today is that the only people that really know in my life is my wife, and I have a child, and she has some idea that I sometimes dress up, but is, I think, too young these days to really know all of the facts. She's certainly been raised in a way to understand that people are different. She'll certainly grow up aware of LGBTQ plus type issues, and she'll certainly be very much aware of those. So I'm intending for her to grow up open, to grow up willing to accept different people, and I'm really hoping that eventually that transpires as her accepting me for who I am. And I hope that's the case. One of the things on my side is that because I'm not going to transition, I don't have any plans to transition whatsoever, there is a degree to which I'll always be mostly the father and the husband, for the most part. It's just occasionally I'm this other person who goes out and has fun and has different friends. And so there is a nice dichotomy there for my family. I'm not asking them to live with Juliette. I'm not asking them to accept Juliette into their lives. And I know for a lot of people who are looking to transition or who are looking to make a more permanent change in their life, that's going to make my advice very limited. And I think that is the key point. I can only talk about my experiences. I can only talk about how I've dealt with certain things. So first thing to say is, I lied to my wife for a long time. I wasn't lying to myself. I knew who I was. No, this whole I was lying to myself, I was hiding myself, that's rubbish. I knew I was doing what I was doing. I knew what I wanted to do. And I chose to hide that because I was afraid that it would cause problems. Of course, inevitably it came out eventually. Inevitably it was something that had to be dealt with, and it caused those problems anyway. So I think my key piece of advice to everyone is that as much as you may have a fear of what's going to happen with you, what's going to happen in relationships, I think ultimately if you have a close relationship with someone, eventually they're going to find out. Eventually they're going to catch you, you're going to see them, something's going to let slip, something is going to happen, and you're going to have to deal with that consequence. And with that in mind, if you can control how that happens, if you control those circumstances, if you can volunteer the information, I'm sure that goes a long way to helping people to understand, helping them to be a little bit more open to listen to you on day one. I didn't do that. I was kind of found out. I pretended it wasn't a big part of my life. I kind of hid things away, purged all my stuff. But when it came down to it, ultimately, I had to try to communicate that this was not part of me, kind of hide things away. And then later on, as little things crept back into my life, little experiences, buying certain items, and it became obvious that this wasn't going to go away. It's not something you can park away forever. It's a key part of my life, and it's something I have to be able to deal with. And that for me was a little bit of a difficult thing to get over. So The first time we sat down and talked about things, it took a very, very long time for me to be able to communicate this in a way where I could be truly honest. Because as much as I knew exactly what I was and what I wanted to do, you get that feeling that if you just dump everything on someone, it's too much. You want to try and eke the information out. You want to let it kind of dribble out so it's a controlled stream rather than just a dump. And I tried doing that. And that didn't work very well for me either, because I was always revealing something new, which gave the impression that things were escalating. What I needed to do was to understand what I wanted in my life. If you're clear on what you want in your life, I feel, based on my experience, that it's best to simply communicate that to anyone you want to talk to about this. Don't let them know a bit and a bit and a bit and a bit and a bit, because it always feels like you're on the move, it always feels like you're changing, it feels like you're always giving you information. The reality really is, if you think you have a happy point where you want to live your life, there really isn't much point in eking the information out over time, because, as in the case of my wife, she felt that I was constantly changing the boundaries on her, changing the rules, changing the information. And I was. When I got to the point of saying, okay, look, this is what I really want, I would be quite happy going out once or twice a month. I'd be happy going out once a week. But, compromise, I'd be happy going out once or twice a month. I'm very happy dressing at home. I'm happy to get dressed back, well, let's say, to have Juliette all hidden away by the time people come home. So we managed to find a compromise type, sort of compromise type situation where I was being as honest as I can be. I was operating within very nice boundaries, well-defined boundaries that we've come to an agreement on between the two of us. There was definitely compromise on both sides. I was doing things a lot more than my wife was initially happy with. I was certainly doing things a lot less than I would have been willing to do. And there's a little bit of out of sight, out of mind involved in our relationship. But there's also a fair bit of openness. So I've made sure that I've never stopped updating my wife on Juliette. It's not something that we can pretend doesn't exist, and therefore if we just don't talk about it, it won't come up. It will come up. So I make sure it's kind of like a sort of releasing a pressure valve. I make sure it comes up relatively often. So it's something that is part of, not necessarily daily conversation, but it's part of regular conversation. It's something that we don't allow to go undiscussed for long periods of time. Whether that's my plans, where I'm going, where I want to go, what I want to do, who I'm meeting up with, whether it's showing photos of I did this, I saw this person, look, here's someone I met. A lot of that information is all provided, and I make sure I'm keeping my wife informed. So, she sees, or I give her information on, what I've done, where I'm going, and I have a rule. For me, there's a key rule, and I want to give this as a piece of advice to everyone. I had decided that I wanted to be honest, and I wanted to be trusted. And so when I was going out, there was an element of lack of understanding from my wife about, does being trans make me gay? Does this make me more attractive to guys? Would I want to sleep with guys? Would I want to mess around? Is this something that is like a way of cheating? And what I decided to do was, I basically gave my wife an open invitation, which was, I will always let her know where I'm going. I put it down the calendar, I explained that I've got an event. And so what I said was, without any warning, on any occasion, if I'm going out on an evening, I said, if she arranges a babysitter, doesn't tell me, don't give me any information whatsoever, if she simply comes up to me as I'm leaving the house and says, I'm coming with you, then that is always open. I'm very happy for her to come out with me. And I made it clear that if she wanted to, she could simply walk up to me as I'm leaving and say, I'm coming with you. And that way, I can make a guarantee that I would never be going anywhere and never be doing anything that she wouldn't be, let's say, happy to witness. That limits my choice of places I go. Sometimes there are certain places where I know other people who I know go to, there are certain venues, etc., that I don't go to because I know I couldn't take my wife there, or my wife wouldn't be happy seeing me in those venues. So I choose not to go to those venues. Candy Girls, for example, is a venue I choose not to go to in the UK. And because I couldn't really take my wife there and have her be happy that I would have gone there on my own. So that's the sort of commitment I made, was that basically at any point, at any time, she could come with me and I'd never be doing anything that I wasn't happy for her to witness. That's kind of the rule we set up. And that's worked fairly well so far. There are, certain things where I do more stuff than she likes. I certainly do more stuff on YouTube than she likes. I post more Flickr pictures and stuff than she'd like me to. And yeah, that's a little bit of a source of disagreement between us. But since it's just, let's say, communicating, it's not face-to-face, it's not, it's just, online communication type stuff, it's generally okay. It's kind of harmless, even though some of my Flickr pictures are a bit naughty. But, I'm just showing off weight loss for the most part. So it's just me being a bit of a, bit of a braggart. I'm trying to look as feminine as I can. If that means I can get my stomach out from time to time, then yeah. Unfortunately, those pictures do get taken. Anyway, so that's a bit of a ramble about how I've dealt with certain things in my life. I think that it's certainly very important to be honest. I think you need to find ways to compromise. I think it is important to compromise. If your intention is to maintain a relationship with someone, I think all relationships have to be built on a degree of compromise, or at least healthy ones do. It can't be a case of, this is who I've decided to be, you have to accept it. I think you can be like that, and you're welcome to be like that, and that's your choice, but you can't then expect other people to fall in line with that, and you can't expect people, it's not up to everyone to accept you as you are if who you are changes. I think that needs to be remembered by some people. You're entitled to be who you want to be, but people are also entitled to reject that person. It's unfortunate, it does happen, but I know there are certain people in my family who wouldn't warm to Juliette and wouldn't want to know about it, wouldn't want to talk about it. Personally, if it ruined our relationship, I'd be prepared to let that go. But it's not something I feel the need to explain to a wider audience just yet. I'd be quite happy communicating about Juliette to more people, but I've chosen not to do that, really on the basis that there's more at stake than just me. I've got a family. I think one day, when my daughter's grown up, I'll be quite happy if people to know. I'd certainly be happy to tell more people, but for now we keep it a little bit more under wraps. Anyway, that's my experience, that's what I've done. A bit more of a serious kind of video discussion type thing for today. I'd be very interested in if anyone's got any sort of experiences or anything anyone's talked about relating to having told people or communicated stuff. It's all very, very personal, and there certainly is no one right answer for any individual. For you, the right answer might be to keep things secret forever. I think you run a risk if you know you're running a risk of being discovered and having to deal with things anyway. It's still your choice. It's how you want to deal with things. I think that's important. We generally have the ability these days to hide a lot about ourselves, and I do think that there's space for everyone to be who they want to be. If you feel you want to tell someone, I think just think it through. Think it through first. Doing things on the spur of the moment is, I think, probably one of the worst things. And I would say this: being reactive is far worse than being proactive. I'd much rather control the information than be caught or discovered, as happened to me, and have to make a sort of split-second decision on how you're going to respond. At this point in my life, having gone through that, I've now made a rule, which I've yet to be tested on, which is that my rule is if I'm ever challenged, I will tell the truth. The absolute, barefaced, straightforward truth. I'm trans. I'm in the trans community. Transvestite, cross-dresser, whatever you want to call me. And I've made that rule now. If challenged, I'll simply tell the truth, straight up. No, no secrecy, no lies, no diversion. And that's a conclusion I only managed to come to, having been put on the spot once before, and not wanting to go through that again. I've made that decision. Anyway, lovely to hear from anyone who's got some comments on this, particularly if you've got your own views or there's anything that you feel you want to talk about with regard to this. Happy to talk to anyone about issues they're having. So if anyone is having any issues, everyone wants to ask me any questions about how I deal with certain things or any advice, like I said, it's all personal. It's I've got no qualifications in this. I'm not, I can only talk to you about what I know about my specific situation. But I'm very happy to talk to anyone who wants to talk about the subject, and if you've got any questions for me, please do ask, and feel free to get in touch with me any way you want to, and I look forward to talking to you. Okay, thanks so much for joining me today, and until next time, bye! Bye!